gonna jump in White Castle today, and I'm not gonna make any hamburger jokes. I'm only gonna go over the mechanisms and why they are awesome. There's 4 reasons why I really like this game. There's one aspect of the game I'm lukewarm on, and then there's another aspect that might just be the death knell to this game, and maybe why it won't survive the long haul in my collection. Before we get into those reasons, I'm gonna try to give you a really quick tour of this game, what it's trying to do, and what the gameplay is like at its core. This game is broken into 3 rounds. Each round you're going to draft 3 die on either end of one of the 3 colored bridges and place those die in spots that allow you to get and do stuff. That is a gross oversimplification of the game, but if you're trying to teach it to somebody, that's all they really need to know to start. Dice are placed on color-coded bridges from left and right, highest to lowest. If you select the die on the left side, you're getting a bonus lantern action that's on your player board. We'll talk a little bit later about how to build that action up and make it more and more powerful. That's essentially the lower die. If you select the die on the right side of the board, which is the higher die, the bonus there is in the details of what happens when you place each die. You see on the board, there's printed die value. As you place a die, you calculate the difference between the printed value or a previously placed die and the die you're placing. If that's a positive number, you get coins associated with it. So if you want money, you definitely want to place the higher die. If the die that you're placing is lower than the die value below you, you actually have to pay money. So there's definitely a cost benefit that's playing out as you're selecting the die to place. You place your die in one of 11 spots. There's 5 spots in the castle. There's 2 spots outside the walls, 1 spot at a well, and then 3 spots on your player board. Let's talk a little bit about the castle first. When you're placing in the castle, there's a wide variety of resources that you'll get or actions that you're able to take. Those actions are associated with clans members on your player board, and we'll get into why you're going to place those clans members around the board in just a second. There's also one last thing. There's a passage of time tracker at the top that serves a dual purpose. The person that's highest on that track gets to go first each round, which there's only 3 rounds, so that's not a huge deal, but can be. But if you get high enough on that track, there's a variable number of endgame points that you'll get, and they could be quite high if you can get high enough. Every time you see this stork symbol here, you'll just go up on that track pretty simply. The well on the bottom left side of the board is kind of a throwaway action if you really don't have anything to do or you really need a resource listed there. You will go there. There's a variable resources as well as 1 daimyo. Daimyo? How do you say that? Daimyo. I'm probably butchering it. I'm sorry. But you get 1 daimyo and 2 other variable resources. It's not the most powerful action in the world. In the bottom right corner, there's these outside the wall spaces, and the symbols that are here are also found on the cards inside the castle. So there are some instances where you can go to either space and do the same action. On the left side, you can either choose to send one of your gardener clans members to the garden. In order to send your gardener meeple there or your garden clans member, you have to pay a variable amount of rice. When you do, you score in-game points automatically, and these could be pretty high, as well as get to do the action or gain the resources to the left. And if you send your die to the right side of the board, you can send your warriors to the training yard. There's an action or a bonus on each of the 3 training areas. You have to pay a variable amount of iron to go to each of these 3 spaces, and you take the resources or do the action that's listed on the tile in the particular yard. How do these score? Well, they're connected to the 3rd clans member you have, the courtier. I don't know how to say that, but they're associated with this castle symbol. So when you go to either the left or the right spot in the yard, or to a corresponding castle symbol on the board, you can immediately place a courtier. We're going to call it courtier from here on out. It sounds fancier. In this bottom spot here, if you pay 2 coins. So we've already talked about coins as a resource. We've talked about rice as a resource. We've talked about iron as a resource. The 3rd one is mother of pearl. And once you place your courtier, you now have the option of paying either 2 or 5 mother of pearl to have your courtier ascend up into the castle to variable floors. Whew. When you do so, they score a number of points. First floor is 3 points. Second floor is 6 points. And if you can get to the top floor, you get 10 points. That would have to happen over multiple actions, since you can only ever move one of these meeples 2 spaces at a time, and they would need to move 3 in order to do so. If you are one of the first 3 to get to the top, you can claim an extra bonus. Now we're going to get into how this game interacts with your player board. Because when your courtier goes to either the first or the second floor, it's going to be next to one of those cards that you can place dice to and get stuff. That card now replaces the card on your board, and now that is a variable action for yourself. And if you remember, we talked about that lantern action at the bottom of your board. When you select that left die, it becomes more and more powerful. See, the card on your board that you're now replacing gets flipped over and is added to that lantern action, giving you more and more stuff. So as you go up this courtier track, essentially, you're making your player board more powerful at the same exact time. I said this was going to be fast, but that's a lot to explain when all you're doing is laying a die. There's more to explain though, because there's 3 spots on your board that are next to all of your clan's members. And when you place a die in one of those spots, you get to do everything that's uncovered in that particular row, on top of take the corresponding action in the card that you just got from the castle. Whew, this is a lot. And I think I hit it all. I don't know. I'm sure I missed something. With that being the overview, and we're going from taking a die, placing a die, to that broader explanation and all those interactions and mechanisms, there is a lot to consider. And I think there's something to say for a game where there's very simple instruction, yet very deep decisions. Anytime a game lets me get it to the table and explain how to play it in like 2 or 3 minutes, but then allows a player through the first play to start to make the connections, like, oh, this is connected to that, and oh, that garden's very powerful, but I really needed to go to the yard, but those aren't worth anything unless I'm moving courtiers up the castle. Oh, but now as I'm doing all of that, I'm making this really powerful action on my board. Like, all of those things that are kind of firing off in someone's brain, at least in mine, really make me feel excited to play this game again almost immediately. And related to this simple mechanism of selecting a die is the second thing that I really like about this game is you have this kind of gimmicky bridge there that, you know, when I first kind of looked at this game, I thought, oh, it's nice. It gives some kind of table presence, but that bridge is a mechanism. The idea that you're weighing a decision between taking a higher die or a lower die, the higher die will give you money, the lower die will activate that lantern action, and it becomes more and more alluring as you go throughout the game, and you put more courtiers into the castle, and that's driving that lantern action card number up, and you're getting more stuff. It's such a beautiful little design and mechanism that also is connected to a physical aspect of the table presence. I frankly, I love it. I also love that worker placement or your clan's member placement not only gives you points, but it also allows you to get stuff and do more stuff. It's this dual purpose mechanism that these clans members are playing. As you go to the garden, you're getting a significant amount of points, but at that same time, you're either able to get more resources or pay coins to do something really powerful that's out on the board. There's just a lot there, and it feels really, really rewarding. At the same time, the courtiers, as they go up the floors, they're not only giving you in-game points, they're also allowing you to snatch that card and place it on your board to enhance your personal actions and also enhance that lantern action. And then you move over to your warriors in the training yard. They're giving you an action or resources immediately, but they're also compounding the effect of those courtiers in the castle. That dual purpose placement makes this game feel good. And the fourth and final thing that I'm really loving about this game is the player board. This idea of progression and building your own personal actions to be more and more powerful that aren't just about placing a die, but also where you select that die from. You're constantly upgrading your board naturally as you play, but that is part of the decisions. On top of that, that lantern action becomes more and more alluring as you play the game. And as you go up more floors in the White Castle, that it's constantly pulling at you. Can I afford to take that leftmost die to pay the price and place it, but is the benefit of doing so basically outweighing that payment? And eventually it does. Eventually, in most cases, you know, I was getting the coins to pay for the placement on top of extra resources. So that left-sided die became almost a no-brainer by the end of most games for me. Now, the one thing that I'm kind of lukewarm on is the theme application. The theme doesn't really come through in the gameplay that much. It's clear you are a kind of lesser clan and you're trying to gain favor throughout the castle by placing people in gardens, training areas, and, you know, which probably makes the most sense, ascending up through the castle floors. That's kind of where it stops. It's, from what I can tell, based upon historical events, this White Castle is a real place, but I couldn't help but feel disconnected by the end of the game with the theme. I think the art and presentation looks really nice. I felt like it was pretty alluring, but you could probably place a lot of different themes on these mechanisms and have it feel very similar, which for me is sort of hollow at the end of the day. And the one thing that I think is the fatal flaw, which might be able to be house ruled, is the length of this game. Let me explain. There's 9 die placement actions that happen in this entire game. There's 11 spots. Do the math. It's not that big of a deal, but it's just something to note. I thought was interesting, which there's more spots than there are die to place, essentially. But there's 2 aspects of this game, one being that passage of time track that I felt was really underutilized. To get any really significant number of points, you're essentially going 11 spots up that track. I never even sniffed that in my plays. And to get to the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 point spots, you're having to go way up to the 15th spot on that track. The game's just not long enough to utilize that track. I didn't feel like it was very important. Since there's only 3 rounds, the idea of going first can only be changed 2 separate times. So it becomes kind of an afterthought to me. And I think it's, you know, especially when you see those really big point spots at the end of that track, you want to get there. You just don't know what you have to sacrifice in order to do so. And then the player boards at the same time, it's probably, I don't know, I guess it's probably my second favorite mechanism in this game is this idea of progression in your personal action spots and in that lantern spot. I just felt like I couldn't focus much on them. I'm doing a lot of stuff out on the board, and by the time my board felt powerful enough to use, the game was over. As you place all of those clans members, all of these different resources become uncovered, and you're able to trigger all of them and also trigger that card that you've kind of replaced a couple different times. But by the time I got there, the game was over. It just I didn't ever feel like I could take advantage of that progression on my board. I waver on this game. I don't know if it's going to stand the test of time in my collection. I felt like this game's almost there. I felt like all of the mechanisms were just top-notch, beautifully designed. I'd be really interested to hear a little bit from the designer on why only 3 rounds of drafting 3 die, basically 9 placements. You know, those kind of combo with also putting your clans members out, and you're doing more than 9 things at the end of the day. There's a fine line. You always, in my opinion, want the player to want more and not feel like they accomplished everything. That idea of wanting more gets you to come back to the game. And I think that's probably the point of such a short game, which also can be a benefit. You know, short games mean you turn it over faster and you play it again and try a new strategy and such. So with that said, I guess I'm going to give it my stamp of approval. It's an incredible game. It's really, really good. Theme is a little bit thin. The number of turns, I guess I could increase that and play a double game or a couple more rounds and see how that kind of balances out. Maybe I would see that the balance isn't there and that 3 rounds is the case. I don't want to knock it too much on that. So if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. If I provided any value whatsoever, maybe like and subscribe. And on that note, have a great day. I'm out of here.